But I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about transit priority implementation. So we're talking about these sorts of things, bus lanes, transit signal priority. And I think we are all pretty much aware in this room, I'd expect, a good reason why we would want to prioritise transit. Fundamentally, it's a more efficient way of using the limited road space we have. But generally speaking, in practice, particularly in car-centric cities, it can be quite difficult to actually get this stuff down on the road. We see, political pushes back against it. It can be very difficult in Melbourne, I think, to prioritise transit, particularly when you're touching on-street parking. And so that's sort of where this research is sort of trying to looking at some of these implementation issues. So I thought I'd sort of flip the normal way of doing a presentation because I'm coming towards the end of my PhD time. And I thought I'd talk a little bit first about some of the answers that we've found, these pragmatic strategies for implementing transit priority, and then cut through and get into sort of some of the backgrounds, the methodology, and some of the case studies that all of this is based on as well. So the first sort of thing we're calling a pragmatic strategy for transit priority implementation in car-centric cities is, first of all, to think about minimising the impact of transit priority. So you can do things like we do here in Melbourne. We've got a great example on the Eastern Freeway, a shoulder bus lane. Doesn't really bother anyone in a car all that much, but it does a lot of good things for transit priority. It helps the buses get along. We have similar examples from Curitiba. They put in these bus stops and direct bus services. So this is when their busway was really, really busy. They couldn't get any more buses down the busway, and so one street across, they put in this, and they run the buses express. Again, it's a great piece of transit priority implementation, but it doesn't really affect anyone in a car, so there's no real pushback. Boston has a great example. They did a peak period pop-up bus lane. They did it between 7 and 9 in the morning, and so it went from a situation where you couldn't park your car on the street on Mondays, Wednesdays and Fridays because of street clearing, to you couldn't park your car on the street anymore. So again, a very small change that minimises the impacts, and so sort of helps you get priority, but without making too much of a difference. Another option is grade separation. We see this a fair bit in Toronto. When things get really hard in the street space, you just go under. They do that a lot in their station access portals. We're seeing this in Adelaide to a certain extent with the Oban City Access. I think it gets really difficult to try and prioritise transit, so just grade separate. Yes, it is very expensive. And again, in Brisbane, this underground bus station. And we'll talk a little bit later about the Toronto Light Rail, which has gone underground in the face of political opposition to grade light rail. Also talk a bit about bottom-up and incremental as a strategy. So this is more about taking opportunities gradually over time. I think we have a great example of how this has been happening here in Melbourne. I couldn't go far enough back in Google Street View, but I remember on Spencer Street when this was just a paper's line, and then someone's been out there and nailed some curving down, presumably when the stop went in, and then when they redid the tracks, the curving was gone and it's real curving now. And so no one really notices this. There's not a huge amount of pushback. It's a small change. But over time, gradually, and from the bottom up and incrementally, things change and we get more transit priority. Curitiba had a very similar sort of thing. They gradually, over time, went from very little bus transit priority to this ginormous network of very, very large inter-district busways, and it sort of gradually grew up over time. And then our fourth strategy is sort of two strategies in one, pop-ups and trials. So pop-ups come from this idea of practical urbanism. You go and try something without really telling anyone, so you do it small, and then you show them and you see, hey, it's not that bad. Or you do a larger scale trial. So right now in King Street in Toronto, the trial has finished after a 1.5-year trial, I think it was. But you do it as a trial. We're going to try this new bit of transit priority implementation, and then at the end, we can decide whether to keep it or not. So there's low risk. Boston again, this pop-up bus lane idea. The mayor and the traffic engineer just sort of decided on Friday, hey, we're going to go do it on Monday. We're only going to put the cones out for a couple of hours. It'll be okay. And if everybody's really upset with us and they ring us all the time, we won't go out on Tuesday. But it turns out that it wasn't that bad. They got on the bus and asked everybody, hey, what did you think about the bus lane? It got you to the city 15 minutes faster. They put that survey results in the newspaper the next day. And, you know, over time, they just kept on putting it out. But again, low risk, they can just not go out tomorrow. And then the fifth pragmatic strategy we're seeing is probably more the one that we're fairly used to in these sorts of environments, this sort of idea of having some sort of formal, rational inquiry process, study, even as far as in Switzerland where they've had a plebiscite, but that probably is something that's a little bit more difficult to organise here. So again, Toronto, the St. Clair Avenue streetcar was very controversial at the time, but they'd done a very in-depth environmental assessment process, and that sort of gave legitimacy to the idea that this is something that's good for us all. And that's something that I'll be touching on a bit later in this presentation, this idea of legitimacy and the whole area of legitimacy theory that comes from public policy analysis. So not just about whether you have the power to do it, but whether you should be doing it as well, and whether the people are behind it. In the city of Port Phillip, the Clarence Street tram priority trial, yep, some of it was removed, but again, there was a formal and rational inquiry process that involved a formal report written by one of the city engineers, and that lent legitimacy to keeping at least some of the measures that have been trialled, even though the far side stops were removed. So that sort of gets us through the sort of 5 pragmatic strategies that have been coming out of this research. So I thought now we'll just sort of go back and give you a bit more of a broader picture as to where this is coming from and how we've been getting there. So the very start of this research sort of came out of this idea that here we are in Melbourne, and it's not like Zurich. It's pretty hard here in Melbourne. We've got the same sort of vehicles going down the road, but we can't seem to do too much about getting things going faster. And wouldn't it be nice if we were in Zurich? And you know, we have all this transit priority and we get to go really fast. But it turns out that that's actually pretty hard, unfortunately. And so me as a traffic engineer, with this sort of rational background, this is the sort of way that I think about these things, or at least the way I did initially. You think about, you know, rational evaluation perspectives. You know, we should definitely put in transit priority because it increases mobility, or it increases accessibility, or it improves economic efficiency, and I do all my modelling to prove that this is the case. But the downside is that transit priority means that someone else is going to be worse off. And different stakeholders will have different priorities. And so I can do as much rational modelling as I like. But if I take away your parking space outside your house, or outside your shop, or outside whatever, you're probably not going to like it. And so this is sort of where we sort of saw it coming back. We had this idea of Zurich as being this utopia of, oh, it'll be fantastic. But here we are, it's kind of this sort of mode of, you know, where will I park if you put in a tram lane or if you put in a bus lane? And we've seen some of these examples. Clarendon Street, part of the tram-stop trial there, was removed. And then King Street, where I lived in Toronto for a few years. And yeah, 65,000 passengers a day on streetcars that were quite often stuck in traffic. And then the key thing that sort of jumped out at me was one of the councillors was saying, yeah, we really would like to move those 65,000 people really fast, but we don't want to impact any of the businesses. So again, different people and different priorities. And looking into the transport research, there's this lovely quote from Marsden and Reardon, which is really saying that us in transport policy research are very good at developing yet another model that shows that this is more efficient than that, or so on and so forth. But the problem is we haven't really engaged with power, politics, legitimacy. There's this whole area in public policy analysis research in the social sciences which touches on this,